We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Again, I want to apologize, but for the delay today. I know a lot of you have taken time off from your busy schedule, from your business to come up here and testify before this committee. And I do apologize for the delay, and also as you see what we deal with every day here on the floor. When something like this occurs, it can throw off our schedule too. So there are a lot of other meetings that were delayed, and we'll probably have members coming and going during the testimony. But we want to go ahead and begin the testimony. I'd like to start with, I know Representative Bruce has got a constituent that is here, and Representative Bruce is going to have to go in a little bit. We're going to start with, is it Winston Carhey? We'll go ahead and start with you first, and please have a seat. That you can either do the podium or or sit down, your choice. And again, welcome. And as you start, maybe tell the committee a little bit about yourself, your business, and then what regulation that you're specifically having a problem with.
Okay. My name is Dr. Winston Carhey, Jr. I'm a doctor of chiropractic and co-owner of Pain to Wellness Center that's located at 3915 Cascade Road, Southwest Atlanta, Georgia, 30331. I'm also the co-owner of that with my beautiful wife, Shantae Evans Carhey, and we work together there. And I happen to be in the Southwest Atlanta area, and also I am part of the Cascade Business and Merchant Association. I'm the past president of that. I have the pleasure of also being the president of Sandtown Community Association, which is basically all the residents in Sandtown. We advocate for them, and any businesses coming into our area, we make sure that they are the adequate businesses for our area. And actually, South Fulton is poised for growth. We want businesses to come into our area. As Commissioner Bill Edwards would say, good things are happening in South Fulton. We want to make sure that it stays that way. And I first would like to thank Roger Bruce for allowing me to come out and be here, and also for you, Representative Billy Knight, for chairing this committee, and for all the committee members here for you having taken the time out for this such a noble cause. I am from Atlanta, Georgia, born and raised, so this is a very important topic to make sure that small businesses do have what they need to have in order to be successful. There are many topics I would like to address. Primarily, we want to make sure we don't have a lot of regulation that is hindering small business and being able to have small businesses thrive. There are many different things that people might say that small businesses need in order to be successful. One of the key major things that I will mention was small businesses, sometimes they think small, but we need not think small. We should now, with technology and the advent of different factors that will be able to allow us to compete with more larger or mid businesses. Another one of the factors is the lack of marketing know-how that some small businesses come into. They're not sure how to market their business well as poor management from time to time. And the big elephant in the room, I think, that everybody knows now with the current economic climate, it would be financing. The availability of financing would also be one of the stumbling blocks for small businesses. But I like to think about it in a different light. I think that some businesses are not sure how they can effectively utilize their resources in order to grow their business. And we need to have innovative, creative ways in the state of Georgia that would allow for these businesses to utilize technology, number one, and also to be able to network and share their resources with other medium and large businesses within the state of Georgia. So I believe that we should look at solutions as opposed to looking at problems. All right? One opportunity is that this economic climate creates is the opportunity to be more creative. We also have opportunity to be more efficient. And if our small businesses become more efficient, then they will become more profitable. And this is a time we can focus on being lean. And for example, solutions that the state might want to implement might be provide a free online service that allows small businesses and assist them in planning. Also helping small businesses review their financial statements and being more efficient with that. That is also a big stumbling block when you're talking about small business. A lot of times we work on efficiency a lot, but we're not really working on our financial wherewithal. I also have a pool of marketing ideas, a place where we can go that clearly tells us what are some ideas that are working for other businesses and how might we implement that in our business. Secondly, we will have growth strategies. Really, the charge can be actually create classes, and these classes can be a revenue source for the state. We could actually charge for these classes. They could be video or live, but these classes would help small business owners to more effectively run their businesses. And rather than go out and hire somebody to be a coach, why don't the state, who have other small businesses, and learn from their successes and provide a online resource to allow businesses to go and access this information to help the small businesses here in Georgia. An online local resource pool is another idea that I have that might help small businesses, and this would be a resource pool that helps people in different regions have different strategies. The reason being, what works in Atlanta might not work in Jasper County. So therefore, if you have an online resource that will be available for maybe the county or maybe for the individuals in Jasper, and there's other small businesses who are being successful, they can share what they do for marketing, what they do for business resources, and then other small businesses might be able to go and find out how. I would suggest that this be something that is shared with businesses that are not directly competing against one another. And lastly, but not least, we need to create tax incentives for large or medium businesses to do business with Georgia small businesses. And therefore, you have the small business now able to keep the dollars in Georgia and also allow the small businesses to grow. And we know that the small businesses are responsible for hiring the majority of individuals who are looking for jobs in Georgia. So this is a couple of ideas I've outlined. Again, I don't know if I talked about my background from Atlanta, Georgia. I actually grew up in Fayette County, Georgia, graduated in 1993. And from there, I was actually there with Representative Matthew Ramsey, as a good friend of mine. And also then I went to Morehouse College, where I had a chance to become a Morehouse man and then go to Life University in Marietta. So born and raised here in Georgia, I just appreciate everything you're doing in Georgia. I want to see Georgia grow, and I hope Georgia small businesses also prosper.
All right. Well, thank you for coming and sharing with the committee. Are there any questions from the committee? I've got two here. Representative Bruce.
First, thanks for coming out. I appreciate it. Is there anything specific? I know you were speaking with the Chiropractic Association, and what was that magazine I just saw you on the cover of?
Yes, sir. I have had the honor of being on the cover of the Georgia Chiropractor magazine. That's the Georgia Chiropractic Association magazine. Yeah. And I received an award for Humanitarian of the Year for my work with Hosea Feed the Hungry and Homeless. Okay. But
I know you said you were going to be speaking with that group. Was there something specific that the state is doing now, either through policy or law or whatever, that's interfering with your organization being able to do business in Georgia, something specific?
Yes. I had a chance to speak with our CEO and also our lobbyist, our legal counsel, Aubrey Lyons, and they said it wasn't anything in particular at this moment to be alarmed about. There were some things that may be being worked on as far as dealing with the Georgia board, but that has not come to light, and hopefully that will not come to light. So keeping that at bay is one thing. And then making sure that the chiropractors in Georgia are free of regulation and not oppressed by any heavy regulation and tax burdens. That was the major thing they want to just communicate. It was general, but that's what they said.
Thank you. Representative Harden, you have any questions?
Yeah, just very quickly, and I kind of put in context what we might can help you with. I noticed on the sheet that you sent in that two things are mentioned, and that is reimbursement for services and access to services, and that's true in any of the healthcare professions now. And we want to look at those. Maybe we can talk with the people from your association that can tell us specifically which ones affect your practice. But there's so many of those that are federal and so many are state.
Yes.
And that we would need to talk. Maybe if you could get us a list, or if you could have someone contact us and tell us which specific regulations are creating access or payment problems at this point in time. And I think that's where we might could be a help. I think, listen, the solutions you've given are great ideas for small business, but I think better left to maybe your association, and because small businesses differ so much. But if you would get us a list of those, basically the regulations that affect access and payment, I'd appreciate that very much.
Yes, sir, we definitely will. There were several things about insurance reimbursement, and I think they said that was in the insurance portion. They would handle that. There's another chamber that handles that. But I definitely will have that email to you from our association.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Dr. Carhue, thank you for coming today, and we appreciate you coming before the committee and taking time out of your schedule today to come tell us what's on your mind. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right. In the interest of some of the folks who have driven far, I know we've got two folks who have come in from the very eastern part of Georgia, and I'm going to try to recognize them first because I know they may have the longest drive back this afternoon. First, Joey Brush, one of our former members, and Senator, I don't know if you remember me, but you were my senator before I started running in Griffin, Georgia.
Yes, sir. That was on the motorcycle districting that run all the way from Martinez to the Speedway at Hampton.
I use your story and I use your example when you came in to town to tell them who under that district plan our senator was. He was all the way from Augusta. So
I was sharing someone that story today. They asked me when I got here first time in the House in 1991. And for the next 3 years, I was in 3 different districts and never moved.
Well,
I am a product of redistricting, but I won't take all your time there. I understand how this process works a little bit, and I've got some remarks, and I'll have some questions, and I've got copies of the remarks for the committee if you want to pass in the background.
Thank you, sir. And again, I apologize for the delay in start, but we're going to, and again, for everyone, I should have done this before we started. We're going to try to reserve about 5 minutes, no more than 5 minutes or so, for the folks to testify at the committee, and then a few minutes for questions by the committee. And I know it's late, so we're on a pretty compact time schedule here. So everybody try to be brief, but we do want to take our time and make sure we hear you. So with that, Senator,
thank
go
you,
ahead.
Mr. Chairman. The home builders of Georgia need your help. In 2009, this legislature created a joint committee to see what could be done to help breathe new life into our struggling industry. I was fortunate to be asked to testify in that committee. Unfortunately, while we were busy searching for answers in 2009, the bureaucracy at the Department of Community Affairs was, through the building codes process, placing new, unnecessary, and costly mandates on the building industry. This is a classic case of the bureaucracy working behind the scenes in the opposite direction of the people and the people's representatives. And this should not have happened. When this legislature and the governor accepted the stimulus money in 2009 to balance the budget, we were required to adopt the 2009 International Energy Conservation Code. The DCA was encouraged and instructed by Governor Perdue to adopt this code with no amendments. If this instruction had been followed, the 10 pages of the IECC dealing with residential construction would have required very little cost to our builders. However, when this task force at DCA passed this code to the DCA board for final passage, it added 35 pages of amendments. These amendments added $1,000 to $2,000 to every new home and to consumers of those homes, while reducing the flexibility and authority of local governments. The DCA allowed an employee of South Face on the task force and only identified this person for the record as a representative of the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority. That member was allowed to introduce costly yet very profitable to South Face amendments that mandated their services and equipments that this company sold and provided. This member was not only allowed to offer these amendments, his profitable amendments, was allowed to vote on those amendments and was not disclosed to the task force or the public. He was allowed to provide his own cost-benefit analysis, and I put that in quote, which is not part of the record. None of this conflict of interest was disclosed to the public, nor is it part of the official record of the meetings. After the task force approved these and other amendments, South Face was then awarded a lucrative contract by JIFA to train builders in contracts on the very mandate that their employees had managed to insert into the code. I have not even in this letter touched on the problems and costs these mandators have placed on the remodelers and the possible effect of to our local governments of mandating never previously done in this state third-party inspections. Our industry is struggling to revive itself and certainly does not need costly mandates at this time. Our codes process must be protected from those who would use it as part of their business plan or political agenda. That's why the Builders Association of Metro Augusta asked me to bring forward a resolution that is going to be introduced by some of our representatives from the Augusta area. This resolution will ask the DCA to set aside those Georgia amendments that it added to the IECC and reconvene a new task force that will not permit members to use the process to promote its own business, and will have an open, published cost-benefit analysis to all members. We in the industry are asking you to do this because this industry does not need at this time any costly regulations. These amendments, and I reiterate, were not required by our agreement with the feds. This process was tainted by unethical conflict of interest, and fourth, it placed seriously policy questions of the state concerning inspections this body has not even mandated inspection this body has not even ventured into, and usurped the authority of the local governing authority to decide these inspection decisions. And I'll yield for questions.
Thank you. Any comment, Representative Harden?
Yeah, thank you very much for coming today. And I would just have one question. Do you have a list of, or the report of that task force that, or could you tell us where to access that so we could see exactly what the legislative delegation will be introducing a resolution on?
I'm going to give the chairman for the committee a copy of some language. This has not been by legislative council. This is some language that I recommended to our legislators for the resolution, and I'll give you a copy of that. I'll also give you a copy in here of the factual evidence of what happened from the beginning to the end, as well as I know it, of what happened in this codes process. I'll also give a copy of why we need this legislation. I'll give you a copy of the questions that we have asked in 3 different meetings I've had with Commissioner Beatty and his representatives, and numerous phone calls that we have had over a year dealing with this. and their answer to that. I'll also give you a copy of off their website, the members of the task force, and also the copy of the letter from Governor Perdue that stated that they should not have any amendments to this code.
All right, I guess the only other thing then that I would ask, where can we access the actual regulations that you don't agree with?
Go on to the Department of Community Affairs website, Energy 2009 IECC.
Energy 2009 IECC.
International Energy Conservation Code. I've been looking at it. It'll tell the whole process through there. There's minutes of the meetings they had there, who was on there, and what it has. All the amendments. You can go through the amendments, who promoted those amendments, where they was voted on, how they was voted on. Okay. It does not have the cost benefit, which has been a complaint of mine. It does not have that at all.
Well, and I thank you for that. And I think we're more interested in how we can find the regulations that are causing the problems rather than how it all developed. And I appreciate your information.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Leader.
Do you have a couple of examples? Good to see you again, Senator Brush.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Neal.
Do you have a couple of examples of maybe some of the more, of those 35, some of the more egregious ones?
The two basic costly changes that they made to these amendments was placed by a South Face employee on the task force. One was mandating what we call blower door tests and duct flush tests to every new home. The federal regulation, which I have a copy over there, it's 10 pages, gave us two options in the federal regulation. It said you could have the blower door test, or you could have your local inspectors do a visual inspection of the home. Give you those two options for testing. They took that option out and mandated blower door tests to every new home and every remodeled home in the state of Georgia coming up, which is another problem altogether. Just in my county, as I pointed out to them, one of the problems with this, last year we had 1,200 permits in my county. We're on pace to do that, about that same amount of permits this year, it looks like. There is 2 companies in our area that do this work, have this equipment, have workers' comp, builder's risk insurance, and are in that business. That means you can do the math. That means they got to each do 600 of them this year to meet the demand that's out there. The builders I talked to this week already, they're trying to get people do this work out of Atlanta right now, businesses out of Atlanta. They have already had one price increase on this service already.
How much? Real quick, how much is this service?
It ranges anywhere from about $300 to $500
versus somebody doing a simple observation.
Versus anybody doing an inspection, your inspector. And that's if everything goes right, Mr. Chairman. I've done a bunch of these, and it usually requires more than one time sometimes. You have to get the heating and air conditioning man on site, the insulation man on site a lot of times. It generally can take all day long sometimes through this process. The second thing they did, which I think the local governments are sure, this body has always, we have never even mandated inspections and code inspections across this state of Georgia. Some counties have them, some do not. This code, this task force mandated inspections for this all across the state, and not only mandated it, but said the city doesn't have the choice. You have to hire a third party inspector, not the county, not the but a third party has to come up, of which this company actually trains and certifies those inspectors across state, and got a nice lucrative contract for doing that.
What's the cost involved in that?
In what
This final inspection, talking about in lieu of what?
Well, my county said they would inspect. That would just be part of their inspection, the same fee that we pay. Now, some counties I've heard said they would have to increase their fee on this inspection, but my county and the ones I've talked to around there that we do business in said this would be part of the inspection when they do the electrical and the plumbing. They would do an installation. They would do this also. Even if they did raise the fee, like some have said, it would at least give you the option. You still had the option. You could do the blower door if the inspection process was too much. You could have had this option. They took away that option.
Sure, if I could just follow up, I want to make sure I understood you. You said a third party.
Yes.
Add somebody to your county building inspector or your city.
No, we can't work for the county or the city.
That's what I understand. This is a new.
This is be a third-party private pump. They're putting people in business.
My
Dude,
question was, how much does that cost, both in what you have to pay them and how much delay does that cause you to build?
well, I said
Before
it.
you have a marketable
From the best I can talk to a lot of our builders around the area, it's costing about $300 in our area now. Some counties I've heard, some areas of the state, up to $500 in price increases, and we know what mandates do to prices. But and I expect them to keep going up. But it costs about that. But the process, and that's if everything goes correctly on the first test.
So if there's a second test, I think, well, then again, is there another
You
charge?
incur another charge, generally.
One more time. I want to make sure I'm clear on this because I've heard of the blower door
Mhm.
test from some of my own local builders, and I agree with you that I'm not sure there's a cost benefit that can be associated with that. Are you telling us there's also a second omnibus inspection that you now have to pay a third party for because of these? You said there were two things that came out of these 35. One was a blower door.
One was a blower door test. The third was mandating third-party inspections, which we've never done in any code. We allow our inspectors to do fire safety inspections, electrical inspections, things like this, but somehow they're not good enough to do energy code inspections, is what this task force decided.
Am I hearing you right? That's another $300 to $500. So we're talking about a new $800 to $1,000.
It could easily. There's other things in there that we don't have time today to go into on there, but there's several costly things in there, but those are the two most egregious.
Plus the cost of the
True.
Representative Henson.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
What is a blower door?
What is a blower door?
I mean, I did ask one of my colleagues who's been
It
here
is-
since the beginning of your testimony, which I wasn't,
Yes,
so I
ma'am.
apologize. So I don't know.
I forget. Sometimes I assume everybody knows what these things are.
No.
It's what they did is something they come out with a few years ago that basically it is looks like a door. The part of the process, it attaches to one of the door. What they do is attach it to the door, one of the entrances of the home, close up all the other windows and doors. It has a big motor on it, a fan that sucks the air out of the house, and a gauge that measures the pressure when that occurs. And this code requires a certain level of that pressure to measure the air tightness of the home. Is what it does.
Okay, so this is energy efficiency.
Supposedly so. Now that is a whole nother debate I haven't got into yet, whether it is actually any good, any of this process. But
That's not quite our debate.
that's not what I'm talking about today, actually.
But a quick question when I
Yes.
follow up. I know you're in the more rural area than we are. Does DeKalb require this?
It is required across the state of Georgia
Okay.
as of July.
Do we have the same problems in DeKalb with having to get outside? A third
I would
person
imagine,
outside?
though I don't know how many building permits DeKalb County's doing right now, but if they're doing a lot of them, they're running the same problem we are.
Okay, it's follow up. Is it required that there be an outside person?
Yes, ma'am.
So therefore, if DeKalb's doing any, even if
Yes.
they're only doing one, they have to get an outside person that's
Yes,
not
ma'am.
hired by the county.
They did
What's
put
wrong
in.
with our county inspectors?
I don't know. They did put an amendment. They was trying to fix this process somewhat. That said that the builder could do it themselves, hire somebody, their own employee, and do that. But most builders I've talked to, if they talk to their attorney or their insurance agent, they're not going to be doing than themselves.
Yeah.
Okay. I
Okay.
mean, did we pass this last year or the year
This
before?
passed, the code process happened, it was supposed to go into effect in January of 11.
It's last year.
We raised so much sand about it then, and all the meetings we had, they did grant a 6-month delay to try to work out some of these problems, and it actually went into effect in July.
So have you come back to the original author of that legislation?
It
And
wasn't
asked,
legislation. That's what I'm trying to
this
tell
is
you.
rules and
This is-
regs.
This
Yeah.
was in the code's adoption process that this happened.
Yeah.
But you could come back and have it legislatively adjusted.
Yes,
Well,
ma'am.
That's
I
why they're
understand
here.
that.
I believe that's why we're here.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. What? Well, I want to say thank you. I mean, this is obviously, we heard in our first testimony from a couple of other builders regarding maybe the same issue. I don't think they brought it in as much detail, but I'm certainly interested in this because I'm hopefully going to move into a home that's being renovated in the next 2 weeks, and I'm curious if I'm going to see this.
Well, one of the
mandates.
things also that I really would like to add, and I know we're getting short on time, those of us on the borders of this state, like I do, we compete with builders across state line. None of our bordering states are doing this. None of them.
Well, that's certainly putting you at a disadvantage competitively, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, I tell you what, thank you so much, Joey. I good to see my old senator. I tell you what, and yes, if you will give it to Kayla, and if we could contact you as we get into this issue, I hope that you would work with us in any way we.
I'm working right now with the Augusta area
Okay.
legislators, Ben Harvey, Quincy, some of them on this resolution. So you'll be seeing it shortly.
Thank you so much for your testimony. All right, next we have another person from neighboring Evans. That is Russell Wilder. Russell, if you will, tell us a little bit about yourself and business and the regulations you've been dealing with that are a burden today.
My name is Russell Wilder. I own Top Shelf Cigar and Tobacco Shop in Evans, Georgia. It's basically Augusta. We're the bedroom community there. I've been living in the Augusta area. Grew up in Augusta since 1973. Moved to Columbia County in the late 80s. I worked for Georgia Power for almost 20 years at Plant Vogel and decided I wanted to be the boss and open my own tobacco shop 7 years ago. It's been very successful. I actually get a paycheck. I actually make enough to send y'all money regularly, so it's working out good for all of us. I want to thank y'all for having me here today and giving me the opportunity to discuss some of the regulations that are roadblocks to growing my business. There's three things in the code section 4811, which is the one that addresses tobacco taxes and tobacco in general, that negatively affect my business, that if changed would help me to increase my sales, grow my business, and possibly lead to hiring more employees. These issues are excise taxes, temporary permits for temporary locations, excise tax refunds on returned merchandise. My business is on an unfair footing because of the excise tax on large cigars in Georgia. The customers that support my locally owned Georgia-based business pay 23% excise tax on every cigar they purchase from me, while their neighbor who buys his or her cigars from a catalog or on the internet does not pay these taxes, even though Georgia law does require it. Not only does Georgia lose out on the excise tax revenue on these sales, but we also lose the sales to out-of-state businesses. Ideally, I would prefer the excise tax on premium hand-rolled cigars be eliminated altogether. Smoking a hand-rolled cigar is a leisure activity similar to enjoying a glass of wine. Premium hand-rolled cigars are an artisan product that are completely different than cigarettes and machine-made domestic cigars you see in a gas station. I'm well aware of how tough balancing the budget has been for the state of Georgia for these last few years, so eliminating a revenue source is probably not what you want to hear from me today. If eliminating the excise tax is not the solution that we can come to, I would prefer to see the playing field leveled for my business by not allowing catalog and internet purchases to be treated any differently than purchases made by Georgians in Georgia-based businesses. We already have laws on the books that require anyone that brings non-tax paid tobacco products into the state register with the state and pay the tax that the law requires. Enforcement of these laws would not be near as difficult as it may sound. The commissioner already has rules within 4811 that need only be enforced. It wouldn't require much more than notifying the shipping companies, UPS, Post Office, FedEx, and then there's a handful of out-of-state vendors in states with no tax on cigars that send by catalog or internet to Georgians. The second issue is getting a permit for a temporary location. Prevents me from setting up a stand to, say, sell cigars at a car show, a golf tournament, outdoor festivals, and any other outdoor events. Businesses that sell alcohol have provisions for getting a temporary permit for these type of events. It could help me increase my sales, give my business exposure to new customers if I had the same option available to me. I have been asked on multiple occasions to set up a temporary tobacco stand, but just turn it down because of the difficulty of getting a tobacco license temporarily. It would just be so much easier to call the Department of Revenue, get a temporary permit, and do just like the alcohol vendors do. The last issue, the refunding on the excise taxes paid on merchandise returned to a manufacturer. As the Georgia Code is currently interpreted, the only way taxes can be recovered on returned product is to get the manufacturer to fill out an affidavit stating that the product was unfit for human consumption. That would be fine if the product I returned was unfit for human consumption. Unfortunately, this is not the case. In just the last 6 months, I've had 2 different vendors send me the wrong product. The vendor was more than happy to take the product back, but I can't recoup the taxes now that I've paid them. Once it comes into the state, I have to pay the taxes by the 10th of the next month, and then no more getting the taxes back. The Department of Revenue, up until 3 years ago, allowed us to get the taxes back. We had to get a credit memo from the vendor, submit the paperwork with our next excise tax filing, and we recouped the taxes paid on returned product. I'm not sure. There was a lot of changes in the way we did business that came along in 2009 when they changed the forms. They basically changed the rules. I suspect it was trying to kind of make hand-rolled cigars fit in the box that cigarettes are, and it's totally different. The revenues are collected differently. It's a whole different ball game. Again, I thank you for giving me the time to speak here today and to try and make it easier to do business here in Georgia.
Let me ask you a question, Mr. Wilder. On the permit issue, are you currently having to apply at the local level or at the state level for a permit?
It comes out of the DOR, Alcohol and Tobacco.
Okay, so it is
Atlanta, and as it stands, I can get a tobacco license to do a temporary thing. I have one for Savannah Rapids Pavilion there in Columbia County for a one-day event I did. The tobacco license still stands as if I operate a store there. That they've worked with me. They've kind of hybridized a way to make it happen, because here in April, I'm going to set up a tent right there by the Augusta National, sell cigars at the Masters.
So what you're telling us is there's not a temporary type of a permit,
Right, like a caterer's license for alcohol.
Okay.
They get, we have festivals all over the state. There's a beer truck there. They've got a caterer's or temporary permit from the Department of Revenue.
Okay, very interesting. 25. Who's that?
It's me.
Representative Pete.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Wilder. Appreciate you being here. We actually have introduced some legislation that's actually mine that's looking to address the excise tax issue on cigars. You may not be aware of that, but we've had several vendors like you who have approached us who are paying legitimately that 23% excise tax and competing against folks who go down to Florida, buy a truckload of cigars and bring them back and are not doing it. One of the options we're looking at, though, is some tougher penalties, but also a stamping of the cigars. Would that address the issue that you're dealing with?
I guess it would. It's like I say, we're so different than cigarettes,
right,
which are handled through distributors from the actual manufacturers.
Would that help make it a more competitive environment, though, or are you really just dealing with folks who are buying online and?
Yeah, people can go to www.cheapestcigarsonearth.com and buy from this guy in Pennsylvania
Right.
who has no OTP excise.
Right, right,
And so I'm right there at a 23% disadvantage automatically.
right.
And if you look through, and I didn't know this till this last week, in 4811 it says anybody in the state, whether it be distributor, dealer, which is my classification, or consumer that imports or brings tobacco products, smokeless cigars, cigarettes, into the state of Georgia must register with the Department of Revenue and pay the taxes, and the same way I do once a month. You know, I'm getting ready when I get back tomorrow to send the DOR check for about $3,500 for excise taxes.
Right. Well, we are looking at that, and so we are hopefully addressing some of the issues that we're also looking at some licensing as well too. I'd be more than glad to chat with you offline or contact you in a minute and see if we can. Hopefully, Mr. Chairman, we're addressing some of the stuff that you're specifically having difficulties with. Hopefully, we're going to address it this session. So.
Ultimately, you know, like I said, do away with the excise tax.
Yeah. Not sure that's going to happen
It's
right
like
now,
taxing around the golf. You know,
but
it's not like cigarettes that
right.
you know, we're a different kind of product, and my industry's tried to focus on that. You know, I have people I don't see when it's hot or when it's cold because they don't enjoy smoking a cigar because it's not pleasant. It's their evening out with the newspaper kind of thing.
Right.
We're a whole different product category.
Well, we may not be able to deal with the excise tax. We are looking at some of the regulations so that may help you.
This economy going, I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Mr. Wilder, thank you. I know you bring up a valid issue, and there's a lot of talk around e-fairness that's going around talking about how our businesses in Georgia, the ones that are putting down roots, brick and mortar, hiring people, paying taxes, you know, being part of this state and its productivity, are at a disadvantage, you know, versus the folks who are doing business online. So, good point, and we appreciate you coming in and talking about this. I certainly, I think we could probably talk to the Department of Revenue on some of these issues and see what we can do. Thank you so much, and Representative Harbin for bringing in Mr. Wilder. We appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank y'all.
How's King? Yep. What? And I'm sorry. What? How do we pronounce it? Did I? Okay. All right. Well, how about telling us a little about yourself and your business and what Georgia regulation you're having a problem with?
Yes, sir. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I own two child care centers, one in Suwanee, Georgia, the other in Cumming, Georgia. I have 54 dedicated professionals, teachers who are very passionate about the care they provide to the children. I'm here today to share my recent personal experiences with a Georgia workers' comp system that I believe unduly burdens small businesses throughout the state of Georgia with a set of rules that I believe are in desperate need of reform. Just to give a order of magnitude example, whenever I meet people and tell them I'm in the child care business, their first response tends to be, wow, how do you afford the liability insurance? It must be a killer. Amazingly, my workers' comp insurance is greater, more costly than my liability and my property insurance combined. And that just shows you an example of the issues that I face. I have a handout that I'll share with the committee this afternoon, going over some of the specific rules that I think can be addressed, those that I've uncovered as I've tried to fight what I think is a very unjust claim by an employee. First of all, the state of Georgia allows or pays out a maximum of 400 weeks of disability. I know in the state of Florida, the maximum is 104 weeks. Now, I'm not going to argue whether that's reasonable or not. Particularly, there are definite injuries that, that sounds reasonable to me. The difficulty in the state of Georgia is that there is no distinction between what I consider real provable injuries and those soft tissue back injuries that, again, any reasonable person I think agrees is open for some serious abuse, and of which I am the victim of that abuse. So, what I've understood that in the state, again, of Florida, that after 6 weeks of disability payments for soft tissue injuries, that the burden of proof shifts to the claimant. While in the state of Georgia, that is not the case. The burden of proof continues to be on the employer, in this case, the employer's insurer. Sorry, I'm going to have to get my glasses out. One of the issues as well is that when a claimant is granted any kind of an impairment judgment by a physician, and there's this term called total impairment measurement. But for instance, I had this teacher that I was referencing had been with me for less than 4 weeks. She claimed she had a back injury. The physician said that she could return to restricted duty as long as she did not lift more than 25 pounds. Well, I put her in a clerical situation, where she didn't have to lift anything. She determined that was still too much for her, and based on the Georgia rules, she could return to total disability. So it was not on a physician. That all the CAT scans, the nerve damage indicators all came out negative. There was no physical evidence of her injury, yet based on the rules of the Georgia workers' comp system, she could return to full disability for 400 weeks. So again, that's what my understanding is I've pushed and pushed and pushed back on this. The insurance companies, they generally settle on these claims, and there's a reason for that. One is, talk about 400 weeks. Another is that for employers, small business owners like myself, have to publish a panel of physicians, which is a list of a minimum of 6 local physicians that are approved, and therefore can be the employee can be directed to those physicians. Any error in that list, a typo, an affiliation that has changed, not having the right mix of physicians, invalidates the whole list. That is then basically allows the employee, the claimant, to go and find a different physician that may be more open to that that claim. Basically, that's the first thing that attorneys look for when they are engaged by a claimant. They come in, they ask for your list, and then they check typos. They check maybe you have the right mix of physicians, practices. You even have to have a diverse, a certain physician that is characterized or qualified as a diverse minority physician. So, I have other things to do other than check weekly to make sure that 2 doctors that happen to be on the list did not somehow agree to join practice and therefore invalidate one of those 6. Not sure why. I don't understand the basis for that. Why the burden is shifted to the small business people to basically administer that list. Excuse me. The thing that really, I guess, has frustrated me most is there's no consequences to false claims. This particular teacher posted on her Facebook while she was on full disability, pictures of her doing some really, quite frankly, quite lewd dance moves that show there's no way a reasonable person could view that she was in pain. The only reason why that was not characterized as fraud is because she was not paid to dance that way. If she was actually paid to dance that way, then it's fraud, because it's only fraud if you're paid by another employer while you're receiving full disability benefits. It's mind-boggling to me. This issue, I'm blessed with the ability. I have over 400 children under my care. I can afford the increase in the workers' comp. If you haven't been following, the Quality Care for Children has published their results. In the 2009 and 2010, over 900 child care providers went out of business. I know that in March they're going to present their 2011 figures. I can guarantee you it's going to be over 1,000. I mean, coincidentally, today, both the CBS and ABC News, local news channels, had a feature on a center in Locust Grove that went out of business, a child care center. And they made note because that was the 3rd center in that small community that had closed recently. And the feature was about how parents have no options. So I view this issue for this committee as twofold. One is these rules they have a cost. They have a real cost. I've talked to other child care owners. We all they have their own horror stories. The other issue, if this is the straw that drives the child care centers out of business, who's going to look after the children when we do create jobs? I mean, those 900 centers alone represent, the statistics shows 14,000 employees and 51,000 children who lost care. 14,000 employees that lost their jobs, 51,000 children who lost their opportunity for care. So this is just one of, I think, one specific burden I think that I would love for this committee to take.
Well, thank you for bringing this to light. First of all, I want to ask if there's any comments or questions from committee members. All right. 25. Go ahead, Representative Peake.
Thank you for being here today, sharing that. I'm in the restaurant business. I have 19 restaurants and almost 1,000 employees, and so I know exactly what you're talking about and feel your pain significantly. So I just want to thank you for being here. Appreciate it. It's exactly what we need to be addressing. Clearly, these regulations are what are driving these businesses to be out of business, and so I appreciate you bringing that attention. We're on it, and we're here. So thank you.
All right, Representative Braddock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for coming today. I'm in another committee, and I heard from another child care provider this week. Is your center required to pay teachers according to the state salary schedule, or is that just for certain?
Yes, ma'am. I think you're talking about pre-K.
Yes.
I have 6 Georgia pre-K classrooms, 3 at each of my schools, and there's 2 categories of teachers that fall under the minimum set by the state. That's the lead teacher, and then also the lead pre-K teacher, just to be sure, and the assistant pre-K teacher. So yes, ma'am, I do follow that guideline in order to keep my program.
So are you having any problems with teachers not coming back to work because they're drawing unemployment during furlough days, or?
I can answer that 2 ways. First of all, relative to my teachers, keeping my good lead teachers is always a problem, particularly when it relates to the opportunity to go to local school systems. We cannot, even though I'm one of the few that can afford and do offer a group health plan for all my employees. The school system offers a much better package and also a better pay scale than what we have. So I actually had one of my superstar lead teachers come to me last week and told me that she was going to apply in Forsyth County for a position, and I understand, and I hope she decides to stay. Now, what I've been mostly successful is for teachers who have children, because I don't charge child care for my teachers, both pre-K and again for any of my teachers. I provide free child care, and that helps incent them to stay with me.
But you've not had any that have turned down jobs because they're drawing unemployment or coming back to work?
No, man. The unemployment issue, as I understand it, is that for state education teachers, they're covered so that when during the summer downtime, they do not receive unemployment. There was a loophole where that would not apply to Georgia pre-K teachers and private providers such as myself, so that we would could see a teacher who would be off for the summer and then file for unemployment and receive unemployment, which also is a cost because that then goes into our unemployment insurance premiums that we pay. So that problem does exist, both in losing good teachers to the school system as well as the potential cost of that unemployment benefits.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Harden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for bringing this to our attention. Workers' comp has always been somewhat of a problem, but I found in my business sometimes you mentioned you get sued immediately if you don't have your records right, and the physicians that are treating these people also have to be very careful, because if they a return to work and they're not, something else happens, and they face lawsuits too. Is this more an issue of tort reform, or do you think it's insurance regulation? What's your feel for that?
That goes above my pay grade, as I think they say. I really haven't thought to that degree, and I apologize. But I do know in this specific instance, the young woman who worked for me was pregnant at the time, and did share those photos that were posted on her Facebook page to the physician, and the judgment was based on the test results that it was not real. But you have a pregnant woman, that physician was not going to risk his insurance premiums to do, what I consider the right thing.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but
Right.
that's, thanks.
All right. Well, Mr. King, thank you. I think that's all the questions, and I appreciate you coming in and sharing testimony. This is certainly one of the items that I think we're hearing some workman's comp. So, have you? I know. Have you shared with your written testimony and some of that information with?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, I will.
Well, thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming. Next, let's see here. I apologize. I'm trying to go again and look for folks who've got a little bit of a drive left. Oakwood, Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. Is that up around Gainesville or that area? Todd Reed. Thank you, Mr. Reed. And again, tell the committee a little bit about yourself, your business, and
new construction business. I do architectural design. Also in the single-family rental property, where we go in and buy foreclosure houses, fix them up, and lease them out. One of the things I've been talking to different colleagues in my industry, because with the real estate and construction probably has been hit the hardest economically here in the last few years. And the general consensus, there's not just one issue involved. It's kind of just a accumulation of issues. We feel like we've been hit, kind of blindsided by the market. The ones of us that are still around, now we feel like we're getting a second phase of just being hit by new government regulations. And I was going to give you a couple of examples of that. Right now, you guys all are probably aware that the property tax freeze got lifted this year, like a 3-year freeze, that the county assessors now can raise property taxes. I live in Hall County, and they've already started to reassess on their website some of the tax values. They're kicking them up. And we're in a market that's still declining, but yet the assessors are scrambling for dollars, so they're looking at ways to, again, squeeze our industry again. So I just ask you guys to reinstate the property tax freeze, even to go as bold as and state no millage rate increase. Let's make the local government stick with the budgets that they're dealt with, and kind of dig deep like we've been doing in the private sector. The other thing that's kind of a county level, but you guys on the state level can help us out. About 3 weeks ago, the first session that Hall County commissioners went into effect, or for their first session, they voted to double the building permit fees for new construction. So we have an industry that has almost been eliminated the last few years, and the county's answer to a shortfall in revenue is to double the fees on new construction. And I just think that's irresponsible. We need your help to protect us from our local county officials. Somebody proposed something radical. Let's stop any new fees. Let's stop any increases. Do something like that for a 3-year period to give us out there in the private sector some stability that we can plan our business plans and know what our rules are, know what the dollar figures are. It's hard to go in and jumping back to the rental property. When I'm going to buy a rental property, you look at, okay, how much do I got to put into it? What's the return on investment? How much can I get out of rent? You have a factor of the property tax value that you don't know what that is. It's hard to make a realistic decision on what you're doing for signing leases, because the leases are usually a 1 to 2 year lease. So again, I would ask you guys to consider reinstating that freeze. Another area, and I know the former senator touched on this. I was glad he did, about the new energy codes. That's an area that is, you you need a couple days on that one just to touch the surface of that one. There are so many problems related to that. The counties really aren't ready for it. They don't know what's going on. There's not a whole lot of consistency. So you go into a project really not knowing what you're going to be up against. And again, that just puts an undue burden on us. I would recommend, and I'm sure that some of the Home Builders Association representation has recommended to go back to the 2006 codes and try to get rid of this new implementation of all these codes. And like I say, I gave him some paperwork to give you guys too as he was walking out. That's been a real tough issue. The third-party calculations of these energy codes. We're doing a house right now that's for an executive of Georgia Power, and even though these full green energy codes aren't in full effect till July 2012, because the HBA kind of got that pushed off a little bit. They're still working trying to get it eliminated. Well, you sent off a plan to a third-party company. This one, I think, was out of Florida. They're not accustomed to lake linear houses. The particular house that we were having evaluated, a good portion of the heated footage was in the basement level because it's a daylight open to one side. Well, that's one of the most efficient heated footages because you've got 3 sides underground. And they didn't even have a calculation for that because they were out of Florida. They don't have those houses. So this whole idea of having a national code just needs to be completely done away with. I mean, it just doesn't work. The other point I wanted to talk about, and I know we're here to talk about trying to eliminate waste, we've got a new state licensing board that was implemented a few years ago. And of course, my company, we're licensed. But I don't see the purpose of that. We have local county, inspections that inspect the houses. They inspect footings. They inspect framing. What is the purpose of the state licensing board? What benefit are we doing other than paying a fee? Because, most state licensing board, you would be, considered a professional. You're registered with it. You're not under the scrutiny of the county doing all individual inspections. So to me, it's just a redundant, unnecessary board that basically it's another fee we pay. We get nothing out of it. We do have to go in and do continuing education classes. Mm-hmm. Those classes are tied back to that green energy that the former senator was talking about. I sat through a class at the end of last year for some continuing ed credits. And basically, it's their manufacturers trying to push some of their new products. So we spend 6 hours for something that we could have found out in 5 minutes from our actual supplier. Yeah. So it's a big waste of time, big waste of money. And I guess what I'm here to do is ask you to look out for us. We don't want to bail out. We want you to know that you're on our side. And,
that's why we're here.
Yeah. And I appreciate this. This is a great format to be able to talk about the issues. A
lot of these issues, these representatives have different professions, they're from different fields, and that's why we're here, is to learn from the different perspectives, and certainly from you, the business fellow that's on the ground, that's hitting these obstacles every day. So
and we just feel, like I say, we feel beat up. We feel like there's nobody there looking out for us. And again, we're not looking for a handout. We're just looking for things to stop. Stop the regulation. Let's just freeze it for a while so we can plan our businesses and plan growth, know what to invest, and know that we're going to actually survive it.
Let me ask you a couple of questions, and we'll take some committee questions and comments. One, you said that your local building permit fee had doubled.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing how much it was versus what it is now?
On average, it went from I want to say, oh gosh, I should have brought the numbers.
Just guess.
Things I was here to talk about.
Is it $200 to $400, or is it
$750 permit? Now it's $1,500. But in addition to that, how the county tried to present it, they said that Hall County is lower than some of the surrounding counties, which is true if you didn't include that Hall County has an impact fee in addition to the building fee for every new construction project. That's another $1,250.
Well, I understand, and I may get some of my fellow representatives. I thought that we had done something, there was something on the books that said a fee is for a service. In other words, it's not a tax. It's for a service. It's to pay for the cost of whatever it is.
Well, their
And
justification.
I'm curious as to in a situation where local governments are doubling a fee perhaps, but yet, you know, certainly in this industry there's been half the building, or almost, you know, probably the building's at 20% of what it used to be. So why is the cost of a building permit for inspecting and going through that process of inspecting it twice what it was when half of the work is there? I'm curious about that.
Their justification for it is they're trying to make their office self-sufficient. Well, the revenues are completely down because there's no new houses to start.
Well,
So-
we always, that's a good question, because in business we don't carry overhead that we shouldn't carry.
Right.
We like you said, we dig deep, and we do without in business because we can't afford to carry unnecessary overhead or whatever. So I think that's a great question. This committee ought to look at from a perspective of, you know, fees and you know, fees are usually for a specific service to cover the cost of a specific service versus a tax that is an arbitrary amount that is supposed to be there for a revenue generator. So I appreciate that comment. Any other questions from committee members? Representative Harden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, I'm trying on the licensing board. I'm trying to see what kind of cost is involved to the contractor in that.
You've had a couple $100s a year, depending on. I mean, it goes up in stages. If you get in commercial, it's a lot larger fee. But for residential, it's a few $100s.
All right, now I'm sorry.
I was going to say, it's not the actual $200. It's the combination of everything. And you look at it, of what purpose is it serving? Why am I going to sit in a 6-hour class for somebody to sell me some new green board sheathing that, like, say, my local supplier could have told me that in 5 minutes? So it's that and the waste of time and energy involved in it.
Yeah, okay, and I guess now, and you say you have a contractor's license locally also.
Oh yeah. It's a state license, Hall County, and before the state licensing code went into effect, you just had to have a business license.
No.
So if you were contracting to build a home, you have all your inspections, you know, from foundation to framing, you know, final inspection. You have throughout the whole process of the house.
Okay.
So to me, it's if we have a state licensing board, then what's the need for the county inspections? You know, and I guess you take some of the industries that have licenses. You know, a hairdresser that's licensed, they don't have an inspector come in and make sure they cut the hair correctly. I mean, it's kind of a redundant situation.
That does pose a good question, Representative Harden. And I don't, you know, some of the things we do, and I think maybe come out in this committee, and I may be mistaken on the history, but some of the license was an attempt to say, okay, we want a standard across the board versus all of those local entities starting to say, hey, you've got to be licensed in Hall County, you be licensed in Fulton County, Chatham County. In other words, all of a sudden you've got to go and do a lot of local. I'm not sure. We may want to look at the history of that.
Yeah, and it's really, I mean, I don't know every county.
Yeah.
I know all the local counties touching Hall. Basically, you had your business license.
Yeah.
The new licensing board, it was a federal mandate or state mandate that you had to be a licensed contractor to be able to pull a permit for new construction.
Well, and I think probably there we may be looking at two different things, and I'm going to look into this, but your licensing boards for the state generally look at the qualifications of an individual that is doing a particular job or profession, whereas your local fees generally apply to the, are you following our code that we've got set up for local codes? And I think we need to study that, as the chairman says. We need to find out exactly what each board, each license requires, and see if there's a need. But thank you for bringing that to our attention. Yeah.
Thank you. We appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to come in before this committee. I think you brought some very valid points.
Thanks for the time.
Next, I understand he may have maybe carpooling today. Is Darren Myers? Darren's from Lawrenceville.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I want to say thanks to all of you for letting us come down here and speak. I noticed from the start I might have been a little underprepared. I'm a generalist in this meeting. I don't have a bill or a law or anything that I wanted to directly bring up to you. But I also work for Mr. Reed indirectly. I own my own company. I own a drywall subcontracting company, D&J Drywall. I agreed with most of the points of the people that have already been up here. The man with the workers' comp, that's one issue. I have to have workers' comp. Any subs I use have to have workers' comp. I'm the owner of the business. I'm not covered. The minimum I can get no coverage for is about $1,000. I'm not covered, but I have to have it. And my guys have it, and a lot of times the builders have it. So again, a lot of these points were valid. Todd's point on doubling the inspection fees. My sales, just to share, I'm sure some of you folks, ladies and gentlemen, might be business people. I don't know all y'all's background. But my sales are down approximately 97% from, I don't know, 1.2 to 1.5 million a year for a stretch of several years in a row, to just got my taxes back from my CPA. My sales this year were $90,000. And I know you're thinking, well, you must be a little daft to still be in this business. I don't know how to do anything else. This is what I've done. And I keep hoping for brighter days ahead. And the only way we're going to get brighter days ahead is through you guys. And the way to do that is be business focused. I know budgets are tight, but at 97% off of sales, I know how budgets are tight. And we have state budget tight, federal budget's tight, but we can't do it by doubling fees or adding this regulation. We'll never come out of this if we don't focus on it and focus of how can I know you guys are legislators, and we put you guys up here, and I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you do this for very little money, and I believe you're doing it for a good reason. You want to help. But you've got to keep in the back of your mind, to help, sometimes you just need to get out of the way. And I don't mean that in a bad thing at all. I just really believe that. You know, I heard this morning on the news, I'm a news junkie, that, well, we have a do-nothing federal Congress. They only passed 80 pieces of legislation out of 7,000. And I sat there and I thought, now, we've been at this a few hundred years in this country. You mean we were lacking 7,000 pieces of legislation that we needed, and we're mad they didn't pass them? I mean, really, can you imagine that? We've been here 200 plus years doing this, and we were really lacking 7,000 pieces of legislation. I don't think we were. I think you guys need to maybe, all of us, maybe step back, business focused. We're the ones who create jobs, business focused, and maybe when you go home, you should be bragging that you didn't pass something or you repealed something. I would be thrilled with you guys if my representative called me and said, hey, Darren, guess what? Repealed 4 laws today.
Yeah, I think you've got a couple amens up here.
Oh, well, but you know what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? That's just the truth. I mean, come home and tell me, hey, we repealed 4 things today, and I will applaud you all day long. And I think it will build business. It'll build our country back. We're over. I don't think I couldn't get from here to my car probably without breaking some type of
code or violation
or something. It's gotten too
far. That's why we're here. And I mean, you're the exact sentiment of what this committee is supposed to be doing here. We hear it across the nation. We hear it across our state. And what you're expressing in your frustration, your somewhat anger is exactly what we're trying to do here. And it gives us more, I think, courage and more to get at it, because, you know, that's what we're supposed to be doing. We need to look at taking things off the books, and that's why this committee is so important. I think you've nailed the sentiment of why we're trying to do this. And by the way, I think we passed the least number of bills last year that we've in history, didn't we? Or was it in the number of years?
My hat's off to all of you.
We may break that again this year.
I hope you do. I hope you do.
But I can't. Your sentiments are exactly why we're doing this.
But thanks again for having me.
Just absolutely.
Try to please keep the small businessman, you know,
In
take
mind.
everything as
Yeah.
how is this going to help create a job? And by adding a $200 fee is not going to do it. It might make the state budget look better, or the county budget, but it's not going to long-term help us. It's not. And I appreciate, again, you guys having stuff like this. This is my first time coming to something like this, and I appreciate the opportunity to address you.
That's why we're here. Representative Peake, you had a comment?
Mr. Myers, thank you for coming here, too. I just want to make one comment to you and Mr. Reed up there in Hall County. There's new Cheddar's up there, just been opened up. That's creating some small business. Hope you good. I hope you guys will keep going there. We're all about small business, and so I hope you come visit us.
I tell you what, he's
Thanks again.
Thank you. And I'm telling you what, you expressed exactly what we're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see here. Let's look at, if you don't mind, Georgia Brownfield Program, Lewis Massey and Gerald. Let me make sure I pronounce this. Pouncey? Pouncey.
Well, Chairman Knight and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm Lewis Massey, and we have the honor of representing the Georgia Brownfield Association. And to my right and your left is Gerald Pouncey, who is the chairman this year of the Georgia Brownfield Association. And Gerald is also the immediate past chairman of the Council for Quality Growth and also serves on the board of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. We want to talk to you briefly about a program that's actually working well. It's a great example of a public-private partnership, and it's called the Georgia Brownfield Program, which is the private sector working with EPD to put properties back into productive use and create jobs and allow businesses to develop all kinds of different properties all over the state. And Gerald's going to describe to you the program briefly, and then we'll talk to you just a little bit about a couple of ways that we recommend that the program be strengthened.
Thank you, Lewis, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the members of the committee. Let me, if I can, give you a 2-minute synopsis of the program. And part of this really arose out of the redevelopment of the Atlantic Steel, now the Atlantic Station site. And we spent, and I was very significantly involved in that redevelopment, we spent about 3 or 4 years, and I won't even begin to describe to you how much money we spent making that redevelopment happen. Well, what became clear out of that redevelopment is that works if you've got a $100 million redevelopment or a $50 million redevelopment. Where the problem begins to occur is for the smaller redevelopments, the million, the $5 million, the $10 million redevelopment, the gas stations that have gone dark, or the shopping centers that you see all over this metropolitan area and all over the state of Georgia that are either have gone dark or are virtually dark in the way they're operating. And what we found is that a lot of the problem that is keeping those from being redevelopment is the fact that you've got environmental problems that are lingering from the old gas station operations, old printing operations, old dry cleaners. In my case, I grew up in Pepperell Mill Village in Opelika, Alabama, right outside Opelika. There are a lot of old cotton mills and old textile mills that have the same fate. And we couldn't get them redeveloped. So we put a program in place and started, I guess, 8 years ago now, Lewis, 9 years ago, which was designed to create private incentives for these redevelopments. And what it did is it said to a buyer, if you buy property and put it in the program before you take title, and that was the key, before you take title and you put it in this program, then we're going to give you certain liability protections once you clean up what's on that property. And those liability protections will run with the land so you can get it financed. Your lender will be able to finance it, and your buyers will be willing to buy it from you 5 or 10 or 20 years down the road. And in addition, we said that we'll also give you the ability to, and this was a real key to the small businesses, is we're going to give you the ability to recover those cleanup costs from the increase in your property taxes. So the idea is, if I've got a shopping center that's sitting there half vacant or 2/3 vacant, and I'm paying, I've got an assessment of $1 million that I'm paying on that property, then I continue to pay that but I conduct my cleanup costs against the increase in taxes for a period of time to help recover some of my cleanup costs, my investment. Gentlemen and ladies, that has worked extremely well in this state. We now have, and this is in less than 10 years, we now have, as of today, 397 properties in this state, and most of them, there are a few large and you'll recognize, like the Ford site, that we're involved in, the couple of the office buildings that you see as you drive down south into Atlanta. But most of these sites are small properties. Most of these sites are the kind of thing, the properties that are in Columbus, Georgia, and Albany, in Rome, and across the state. And it's worked. But there's one issue that we run into. Remember that I just described to you that you have to put the property in the program before you take title. What has happened in this economic recession is that a number of owners of properties, of sellers, have said, folks, because of now what you're paying me versus what this property was worth 5 years ago, it's not worth it for me to take the risk of letting you do much of the testing on this property and file all this with the state agencies, environmental agencies, prior to the time you take title to the property. Because for all I know, you're going to take that information, you're going to provide it to the state, and you're going to walk away from this deal. And as a result, I'm going to be sitting left here holding the bag with no real recourse. And honestly, we just missed it when we drafted the legislation. We just missed that issue. Over the last 2 to 3 years, particularly with the economic downturn, that's become more and more apparent that is a real problem with this program. We're seeing more and more transactions, and after this hearing, I can certainly discuss with any or all of the members specific deals where this has happened, many deals where this has happened, where sellers just aren't willing to expose themselves based upon sales today. And a lot of the properties you see that are still under-operated or not operated at all around this area, that's the reason. We have worked with the state, and I can represent, I'm authorized to represent, with that Mark Smith, who's head of the Land Protection Branch for the Environmental Protection Division, which is the branch that handles all these contaminated sites. We've worked with them, and they are in agreement with this proposal. And what this proposal effectively is to give folks a grace period after they take title where they can put this property into the program. Right now, the proposal is 30 days. There's flexibility as to whether that needs to be a little bit longer, but that's the proposal that's on the table. It's something, as I mentioned, that the EPD through Mark Smith has agreed to as well. So that is what's on the table currently. And the idea is this. That gives you, if you own a property, comfort that I've already bought the property. I've paid to you your compensation for the property before I start to take it through the program. You no longer have that fear as an owner of a property that's impacted that I'm going to open up Pandora's box and then walk away from the deal and not take title. And we believe that's going to do two things. We believe that it's going to assist with a lot of these property owners who are underwater at the moment because they can't dispose of these assets. That's affecting their ability to hire people and keep people on board. Second, we feel like with regard to redevelopment, that allows redevelopment in a lot of these areas where you simply have sellers that, as of today, aren't just prepared to allow testing and allow these properties to go into brownfield because they're afraid the buyer's going to walk away. And I'm certainly open to questions, and I want to thank you all for allowing us to explain what we have before you.
Just one more quick comment, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. We have spoken with Chairperson Lynn Smith about this legislation, and that's at the back of the handout. And she's looking very favorable upon that, and thought it would, since it would help so many small businesses across the state. And I think Gerald told me earlier that there have been 397 properties put into the brownfield program since its inception about 9 or 10 years ago. So you can see the potential for redevelopment and creating jobs. And so she thought it'd be great if we came to talk to this committee, and we appreciate the opportunity.
Okay. I think this is an interesting an idea because I know when this could affect not only small businesses but large businesses. But certainly, if I go back to my community, I'm in Spalding County, Griffin, Georgia, and probably like every other community out there, there's an old gas station that probably got a prime location somewhere, but nobody's using it. It's probably an old downtown, or somebody would love to start a business there. Or you could be like a community like mine where it's an old mill town, just like you talked about, old cotton mills, old warehouse type property, and nobody wants to redevelop it because of potential liability. I think this is something that really could have some merit, and I know that probably from a perspective of our local governments, our local partners, they'd probably like to see good producing property back on the rolls versus blighted, dilapidated property that's just sitting there non-productive. So any questions? Representative Braddock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for coming today. So you're saying that by implementing this change, it would actually spark the commercial real estate market and redevelopment?
It will in certain areas, because as I mentioned, we've developed a term for this, the recalcitrant seller, and it merely is that seller that's afraid to allow this property to be tested and entered into these programs prior to someone takes title, simply because he's afraid that's going to open up Pandora's box, and he's left holding the bag, and the buyer walks away from the deal.
Okay, so that'll create jobs in and of itself. But now the piece you said that's going to help the small businesses create jobs, I kind of missed.
Sure, it's two things. One is a lot of these redevelopments that I'm referring to, these are small businesses that are looking to buy these properties. They're looking to come in and buy these. It's not.
So you're saying they're going to create jobs if they can get into the properties that are redeveloped.
Absolutely, because a lot of these are the small gas stations that are in the downtown areas of small towns around Georgia.
Okay, thank you.
And I think, and I don't understand it all, but the idea is that you need this 30-day window for a prospective buyer to put it into this existing brownfield program, which is already already on the books.
That's correct.
Okay.
And it's working.
It is.
Right. Okay.
All right. Representative Harden.
And the program is working. What happens if the buyer does not get it into the brownfield program?
There are three things that happens if the buyer decides if the buyer can't put it in the program. This is where we saw so many people walking away. Number one, that buyer has no ability to offset his cleanup cost against his increase in property taxes due to the redevelopment. Right. So he has no way to recover those costs, which particularly affects small businesses. Two is we give that buyer protection from being sued by third parties because of the contamination that's already there. Under today's law, if he doesn't put it into the program, and I come in and I buy a gas station site or I buy a shopping center that had an old dry cleaners, and that contamination has moved off site prior to the time I took title, I'm subject to being sued by third parties because I impacted that property, even though I didn't cause it, and even though I didn't even own it at the time that contamination occurred. And it gives them protection, and it also gives folks that lend on those properties that same protection. So you can see how that helps.
Now, all of those protections will be in the addition to the law, the amendment that you're proposing. Is that?
Representative, all those are currently in the law. The problem is they don't extend to a buyer who enters the property into the program after they take title. They have to enter it into the program before they take title, before they get those protections. And therefore, if a seller says you can't test on my property till after you take title, or you can't put it into the state program until after you take title, effectively you've got it a catch-22. The buyer can't get into the program. The seller doesn't want to open it up to be tested.
All right, and I guess what I'm after now to understand, what does this do for the seller if the buyer then finds he can't get into the program? Then does he have an opt-out clause, and then where does that leave the seller in any better position than he's in now?
Well, you've asked a good question. I apologize for not explaining this better. After the buyer takes title, you simply, to get into the program as a buyer, all you have to do is apply to the program and pay your application fee, and then perform the cleanup within a certain period of time, and generally it's several years after you take title. So you as a buyer aren't kicked out because you don't enter it into the program. You aren't kicked out because there's not a process within it for kicking buyers out.
In other words, there's not a qualification that you could possibly be in jeopardy of of not obtaining a certain qualification or meeting a certain criteria.
That's correct. That's correct, Mr. Chairman. All you have to be, the only qualification is that you not be the person that actually caused the contamination. It makes sense.
All right. Any more questions from the committee? Gentlemen, thank you. I think this is an idea that we certainly want to explore and see what we can do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the committee.
All right. Yeah. Yes. Here, Rita Bass, still here? Yes. All right, and Whitney Fuchs, all right, still here. And Kayla, are there additional guests? I know that's two. I want to make sure because we're Frank Bennett and Norma Adams. Still here? All right. All right. So we've got four more presentations, and guys, we've got about 30 minutes. So I'm going to ask you, and again, I appreciate you guys coming here. We're just unfortunate with the schedule today on the floor have been pushed for time. So as you get up here, please try to make it as brief as possible. But we certainly want to hear from you. So Rita Bass, we'll hear from you next.
I'm one of those daycare centers that's about to close. I might be, well, I don't want to say I'm about to close, but I could be. Because of...
Rita, if you will, the microphone, just sort of turn it towards you. It'll turn towards you. There you go.
Okay. When he was talking about workers' comp and all that, and then he did that prelude to the problems that the centers are having. This is my 14th year in business. I'm Rita Bass, and I'm the owner of Heritage Child Development Center in DeKalb County on Moreland Avenue, State Route 42. And when I bought that building in 1997, the license capacity was for 28. That's as big as it was. And I promptly started trying to get bigger because I wanted to qualify for lottery-funded pre-K. I knew I needed a classroom that would hold 18 to 20 children. And all I've ever tried to do was comply with the rules of the state. I've done everything to comply. I first got a first mortgage on our house, our personal residence, trying to do it myself because no bank loans money for daycares or restaurants. I got a contractor who ran me out of money. I got a second mortgage on our house. My husband's very good to me. And this contractor put the wrong ridge line in, and he fled. Then BB&T came and gave me a $100,000 line of credit. And I finished construction. I heard that we could no longer drive our vans onto school property, so I bought a bus. Had a beautiful facility. I could now qualify for 62 children instead of the 28. Had 2 beautiful classrooms. We finished construction in 2008, too late to apply for lottery-funded pre-K. So we went to school. We wanted to make sure all our T's were crossed and our I's were dotted. So we all qualified for the pre-K requirements. Instead of CDAs, we went higher. We got our TCCs. So in 2009, we applied for lottery-funded pre-K, and we didn't get it. Now I got a first mortgage, second mortgage on our house that was paid for. I got a $100,000 line of credit with the bank, and I got a bus as well as my van note, and I didn't get lottery-funded pre-K. I had 54 children at that time. They started to go away because parents wanted the free pre-K, and the bank would not give me a consolidation loan. And so since 2008, I've been putting out fires, trying to stay abreast of everything. My husband retired from Kroger, gave me all his 401k. He's given me everything. He's a very good fellow. And I've been trying my best to save his investment. But now the bank is trying to take my building because that line of credit turned into a loan, and now I don't own my building anymore. It's BB&T's and the corporations. Okay, so even though I've done everything I could, the rules for complying with their rules or whatever, they just don't make sense. I don't know why I didn't get lottery pre-K. They just said that they weren't awarding any slots, and they're not giving any more slots. Okay, the bank appraised my building at $469,000, and they only gave me $100,000. So what happened to the other $369,000? I know about the banking scandal. I know about the robo-sign. I know about all of that. Now DeKalb County is forcing me to get the sprinkler inspected. They're forcing me to do all this stuff that I can't afford to do. I don't even need a sprinkler anymore, but I'm having to do that. So if you want to help me with that, I know Michelle is gone, but tell them that if I don't need the sprinkler, why do I have to get it inspected? Okay? What else? The labor department. I don't have a staff anymore. They were laid off. Well, when you lay them off and they draw unemployment, your tax rate goes up. So now my rate, which used to be 1 point something or 0 point something, is now 7.25, and a levy set on my bank account, and in 7 days I paid $1,500 in NSF charges to the same BB&T because I couldn't afford it. You know what I'm saying? So I'm about to lose everything my husband worked all his life for because of despicable bank practices, labor increases, DeKalb County fire marshal regulations that are moot at this point. I need a bailout. What can you help me with?
Well, let me, and we do have some questions. I want to make sure we go back. It sounds like the root of your issue is that your business model and your reason for investing in, your building and more education for your teachers, making sure that they're.
We did everything we were supposed to do.
The reason that you did that was the lottery pre-K program.
I've repented.
Okay. I guess my question is, and I don't know this, and maybe a fellow representative may pipe in. Is it because there are just limited slots and you were simply not chosen? Or
they didn't tell me. I have no idea. This man says he has 3 in both his centers.
Yeah.
All I wanted was 1 because my capacity was only 62.
Yeah.
I just wanted 1 lottery-funded classroom because I had 54 at the time I applied. I don't know why I didn't get it.
Now, are you still trying to apply?
They're not giving any more slots.
All the cuts,
yeah.
They actually cut out 200 to 300 classrooms last year, and they're cutting 2,000 slots this year to fund the teacher increases, so that will cut out another 100 to 200 classrooms. These math, but yeah, so there now. Granted, there's now 900 less child care centers. Oh, actually 1,000 less and more than that now. But this is happening every day. In part because even if you got the lottery pre-K, they're only paying the program operators $30 a week to run that program.
All right. Representative Braddock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think what I hear you saying is you've done everything to comply, but you're having trouble competing because you're competing with the state who's giving the services away, and you can't really charge for your services. So you're not drawing in enough customers to compete privately as a daycare center because of the state-funded free spots.
Now, I'm glad you said that because I forgot to say it. They are putting slots in the YMCA. They're putting slots in mega centers. I think they're running all the small centers out of business. Okay, now I don't know why they're running them out of business. I think it's probably easier to go to the YMCA and check 3 or 4 classrooms than it is to come to my center and this center over here, the smaller centers. But that's not fair. That's not how the money should be distributed. You understand? But that's what they're doing. I didn't want to say that, but that's exactly what they're doing. Right from the start, not right from the start, Sheltering Arms has a monopoly on Head Start. Right from the start now is looking at all the mega centers with a capacity of 100, 200, 300. This guy has 3 centers in 2 different locations. So they'll go to him and do his, one inspector can go to him and do all of the classrooms rather than send 6 inspectors to his centers.
Yeah.
And that might be cutting down on staff or whatever.
And that may be something that this committee can look at is the criteria to make sure that the criteria for those are certainly on a level playing field, not necessarily weighted towards big boxes, or what I would call in that term. I know y'all are not big boxes, but larger, commercial, more commercialized versus, maybe a smaller business type. So,
right, but my center, I can stand my center up against any of these, okay? And I never would have gone in all that debt had I known what was going on, okay? But at this point, I'm losing everything that we've invested. My husband worked 42 years and 3 months at Kroger. Everything is gone. I have a son, 25. That was his inheritance. You know what I'm saying? And it's really hard. So I got a ticket from the fire marshal because I didn't get the darn sprinkler inspected. I don't even need it. It's not even required.
No.
So, but anyway, I don't want to get upset.
Well, thank you for your testimony, and I think you brought some good points for the committee to look at.
Do something about it?
We're gonna try to look into everything. Thank you so much, Rita. And now, Whitney Fuchs.
I'll try to be brief. I know you all had a long day.
Good gracious at the paperwork.
Got this. My name is Whitney Fuchs. I am the CEO of Georgia Community Support and Solutions. We're a Georgia nonprofit organization, been around for about 12 years. We are on the cusp of being not a small business anymore. We have close to 400 employees. We're 12 years old. You don't go from 0 to 400 in 12 years without some hard work and some effort. I've been doing nonprofits my entire career since 1984 here in Georgia. I came here as a young man, 11 years old. My father was transferred here, and I've lived in North Hall County my whole life since that time. We are a provider of services to people with developmental disabilities, people with autism, and as a nonprofit, we reinvest any income in our reserves and in new services to people in the community. What I'm here today is that we have gotten to a point where we have several oversight mechanisms for our organization that are redundant and expensive, and have gotten to the point where it's very difficult to actually do business in a cost-effective manner. We have over 10 oversight mechanisms on the services we provide. Most of those emanate from the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. We have over 2,000 pages of policies that we have to teach our employees who make $8.50 to $9 an hour to start. We have about a 38% turnover every year. So that means I've got to train them every year. Not only that, in 2008, we had 681 pages. 4 years later, we have in the manual 1,119 pages. We've doubled that, almost doubled the policies in 4 years. Now, a lot of people are saying that that's because the Department of Justice settlement that the state entered into, and we have to have much more oversight. But what we have here is not oversight. What we have here is redundancy, and we've got to do something about it. Our suggestion is that there's an alignment of oversight to providers that is created at the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. You have at least 3 offices there that do very similar things: an Office of Investigation, an Office of Quality Management, and an Office of Provider Compliance. Each one of those has a director and staff. That's redundant. We are also licensed by the Department of Community Health, Healthcare Facilities Regulations. We also have a national accreditation requirement in our contracts that we pay. Ours costs us about $22,000 every 3 years. We are also overseen by support coordination, which we have monthly visits to examine the quality of our services by an outside entity. And then we also have kind of a biannual, so far it's been, visit from the Delmarva Corporation, which is a contractor to the Department of Behavioral Health. We also get a biannual audit from the Social Security Administration, as well as every 3 years or so we get audited by the Georgia Medical Care Foundation to make sure that we're not billing Medicaid improperly. So we've got a lot of oversight to what we do and what we provide. We feel that this is getting to the point where it's costing the state of Georgia more money that could be used for services. You got a 5,000 to 7,000 person waiting list here. What we pay yearly for this, we could serve 22 people off of that. I'm one of 350 providers here in the state of Georgia. Do the math. We could get a big chunk of that waiting list by just trimming some of these things. We spoke to the department about these back this summer. Oh yeah, we're going to do something about this. We're going to bring those down to 200 pages because other states have 150 pages, 120 pages of regulations. We're going to do something about that. In July, it was 1,083 pages. In October, it was 1,107 pages. And now, January, the new issue was 1,119 pages. The first trick to stopping or reducing the size is to stop its growth. We're not stopping its growth. We got to do something. Our suggestion is with the alignment of those department offices. The other one is to establish a process for review of any new policies, so that just as HFR, Healthcare Facilities Regulations, has to have a public comment period on any new regulations or policies that are developed under the licenses, so should DBHDD. They certainly have plenty already. So any new ones should have some sort of a public comment period. So there's an unintended consequences examination before they go ahead and put some more out there. Thank you for your time.
How many different regulations are in there? I know you've got the pages counted.
Yeah, we have an Office of Quality Assurance because there's no way I could manage all that. So each one of these is probably, this has got 3,200 different regulations.
3,200.
Yep. And we're providing support to people with developmental disabilities. This is not building a rocket. This is not operating on people's brains. This is a thing that happens every day that families deliver to their family members. We've made it tremendously complex and expensive.
You didn't leave one of those copies for us, did you?
No.
What is about $20 worth of paper right there?
Yeah, it is.
Well, first of all, you are the reason we're here. I mean, again, we've heard several testimonies, but that's the exact reason why people can't do business today. It's too complicated. It's you can't get down to what you're supposed to be doing, and I don't even know where to dive into that.
If I wasn't steeped in nonprofits and doing this since the beginning of my career, my whole career has been with people with developmental disabilities, I would never, ever go into this field. I consider myself an entrepreneur. I mean, we went from 0 to $20 million in 12 years. You don't do that. For-profit businesses, that's unbelievable. Mm-hmm. Nonprofits, it's unbelievable. We run ourselves like a business. We do not waste money. We do not examine. We provide return investment into our communities with what we generate in excess revenue. We partner with nonprofit foundations and other collaborators in our community to extend resources to these folks.
Well, thank you. I know we've got a question. Representative Braddock.
I think my microphone was on. Yeah. So, yeah, it's me again. So, I think I'd like to know, what states did you say have less regulation?
Kansas, Missouri,
Okay.
South Carolina.
So, I think we should definitely have an initiative to look at that because, you know, some of this is just outright job justification. So,
Yeah, I did some research on that, and back in 2009, before the Department of Human Resources split apart, and the Department of Community Health had a total of about 15,600 employees. After you guys split them up and created the DBHDD and moved public health over to DCH and HFR over to DCH, the number went up to 19,000. So yeah, you guys did make some jobs. Unfortunately, they were state jobs and not jobs in our community. They were downtown at number 2 Peachtree. So.
Would you mind? I know from a testimony you've given us a lot of statistics and a lot of background information of where the regulations were, the additions. Would you mind sharing with Janae possibly afterwards to get us some information of sort of what
Absolutely.
your presentation was here so that we can start to address this issue?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
I appreciate your time this afternoon. I know it's late.
Frank Bennett, I know you have waited patiently. Thank you for doing that.
I only bought 3 hours of parking, and it expired 2 minutes ago. My name's Frank Bennett. I am a child care center owner in Marietta. I own 3 centers in Marietta, Alpharetta, and Roswell. I employ 150 people. I have a payroll of $2.5 million, and pay a lot of property taxes in those 3 areas. I'm also a current board member of the Georgia Child Care Association and past president of the Georgia Child Care Association. Howes King, who spoke earlier, is the current president. As we all know, or at least how I feel, the child care industry is very heavily regulated. I can't, although that gentleman's stack of paper puts mine to shame, but we have a 60-page manual that we have to follow in our industry that tells you everything. There's the thing I always get a kick out of. There's a 22-step diapering procedure that we have to follow.
And you can get cited if you do any one in the wrong order.
Exactly, 22 steps, including washing an infant's hands, which is kind of strange. But anyway, some of the regulations are certainly necessary and effective. I don't deny that, but some make no sense. Some are clearly overreaching, and some are just burdensome and drive costs higher and have unintended consequences. In the make no sense category, recently DECAL, which is the Department of Early Care and Learning that regulates us, passed a rule requiring all lead teachers to have a minimum of a CDA credential. A CDA is a Child Development Associate credential. The thing is that CDA credential is geared towards infants and toddlers. We serve more than infants and toddlers. We have an after-school program that typically will hire a young college young lady who's at Kennesaw State getting her early childhood degree, but they come over and work for us in the afternoons, get good experience, or they might already have a degree in something else and they just want to come work for us. But now they're going to have to go back and get a CDA, and they work with children that are 10 and 11 years old, but they're going to have to go get a CDA to learn about infants and toddlers, even though they never go in the infant and toddler room. We've asked DECAL to relook at that regulation. We recently received confirmation that's going to stand. So that's one that's a head scratcher for me. The state also mandates pre-K salaries. There's not many other industries that I can think of where pre-K teacher salaries are mandated. They tell us a minimum that we have to pay. It's like a minimum wage of $30,000 a year. I'm just a private business person. I'd rather hire somebody based on the market salary. And a lot of times I pay above the market, but still, why mandate salaries? Let a teacher stand on their own merits and let us hire hire them based on what the market will bear, not on what the state tells us. Another thing we touched on earlier is teachers. We have teachers who are applying for unemployment over Christmas break. They'll go on Christmas break for 2 weeks and file for unemployment. I actually had a teacher file for unemployment while she was still employed with me. And I asked her why. I called her into the office. I said, I got this thing from the unemployment office. She goes, well, I was down at the Department of Labor with my cousin, and she was applying for it, and I asked them if I could, and they said, go ahead and see if you can get something. It just boggled my mind. So those are the kind of things that we're facing.
Let me add one thing, though. We did go to Commissioner Mark Butler, who was very helpful. There was law in the books that already covered this, but they clarified their rules and regs, and that just went into effect in January, so that pre-K teachers will no longer be able to get unemployment on regularly scheduled school breaks, such as Christmas break and winter. However, one unintended consequence of having to cut the school year back last year in pre-K is that those teachers then went and filed. They were offered the same job back, but just the 20 less days, so they made about $3,000 less, and they decided they didn't want to do that. They'd rather file for unemployment, and they were successful in getting unemployment benefits, and the Department of Labor has told us that they can't do anything about that aspect of it because that's just a risk of doing business with the state, and that so if you all cut the school year back and cut the teacher salary, we end up paying the unemployment benefits, which affects the experience rating of our entire payroll.
Even though those teachers were offered their jobs back?
Right.
$3,000 less in the eyes of an ALJ was substantially, or a hearing officer was substantially less pay, and they were granted benefits. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They would rather take the unemployment than come back to work on the pre-K job for $3,000.
Even though they were offered a job?
Right.
Yes.
And you said the hearing, I'm sorry, you went before who? I haven't gone through this process.
The Department of Labor, they have administrative hearing officers that are paid about $30,000 a year, and these are the people making those decisions. I think this is a result of the previous administration had a real lack of training of these folks, and I think that the department is trying to do a lot to train them, but on this issue, the department told us they can't help us because the law basically requires if you are offered a job at, quote, substantially less pay, and in this case, this was deemed substantially less pay, you have to pay unemployment.
And that's in code.
They told us they thought it was in case law. But we'd certainly love for this committee to look at addressing that. That when a state is dictating the calendar year, I mean, it wasn't just a pay cut to teachers even, it was dictating the calendar year.
It's more than that. You've got a substantial job offer that would keep you off unemployment, but you chose not to take it.
And I have numerous center owners who've had that problem. It wasn't an isolated incident.
Is there any way that you could maybe get a couple of examples of that? And again, I'm not sure how I don't necessarily want to dig into private personal information of the particular employee. So if you could redact any of the information, I would appreciate that. But I would love to have a couple of examples of that process that this committee could dive down into and look at that process.
Be happy to, because I know in one instance she actually ended up making more with the unemployment benefits she was awarded than she would have made if she had gotten the job that she had the previous year at the same salary. Like, the benefits were greater than the salary of the job she would have had prior to the cut.
No wonder we're upside down and borrowing hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government to pay unemployment benefits. Well, proceed.
The Department of Early Care and Learning is also implementing a quality rating system as we speak to rate child care centers much like a motel or a restaurant. And we, the Georgia Child Care Association, are actually for that. We think that's a good thing. That gives parents more information so that they can make an informed decision about what is a quality center and what is not. Many other states have this. But one requirement of their system that other states don't have is they're requiring, if you want to do this, all your teachers must go online and enter their name and a lot of personal information in what's called the PDR, the Professional Development Registry. And information like home email, home address, home phone number, and even their Social Security number. And we have a lot of concerns on a lot of different levels. First of all, we have teachers coming to us saying, I'm not putting my Social Security number in there. We also, have concerns about giving the state access to my employees, direct access. I like to be the gatekeeper on what information my employees get personally, that they're my employees, I've hired them, I've trained them. I don't want the state, sending them emails talking about job opportunities and stuff. There's actually a resume building wizard on this website that when they enter in, they can then go build a resume and go get another job. And then the other concern that we have about the Professional Development Registry is union access. Unions want to get into our business very badly. Even though Georgia's a right-to-work state, they've identified the child care business as a business that they want to grow in, because they're as everybody knows, they're losing jobs everywhere else, losing members everywhere else. And we're afraid they'll do a Freedom of Information Act request, get all of my employees' home phone numbers, have a meeting in somebody's living room on a Sunday, and then Monday I come to work and I could be facing a union vote in 10 days, and I don't even know about it. So
and let me just say that Jay Powell and Nels Peterson, the AG's office, have worked on language that they are including in his omnibus to open records bill, if you are familiar with that. But we certainly appreciate it's going to be up for hearing now tomorrow at 8 because things ran late today, but in a subcommittee. But that's certainly something that we hope that will be supported, because right now all of that information is discoverable.
And I'd rather not the information be there to begin with, personally, as an owner. But if it's going to be there, at least let it not be subject to a Freedom of Information Act request. Because other states are having union issues in child care, Michigan, Washington State, and others, and it's pretty scary. Over and above these specific rules and regulations that I mentioned, the trend in child care is towards more and more government regulation, all in the name of increasing quality, which sounds great on paper. But there's a University of Chicago study found that regulations both increase the cost of care that we have to pass on to parents, and more importantly, reduces the utilization of care by lower income parents and children who actually could benefit the most from being in licensed care. As costs go up, and we pass this on to the parents, many parents are then forced to choose cheaper but unsafe and unlicensed, unregulated care and arrangements with a friend, neighbor, or relative. Only 30% of Georgia's children are in licensed child care. The other 70% are in these informal arrangements that we're talking about. And so while it sounds good, let's there's a lot of these large groups out there that they're saying, let's regulate child care more. Georgia needs tougher restrictions. It's the law of unintended consequences. If you pass these great rules and regulations, but all of a sudden the number of kids in licensed care drops from 30% to 25%, you really haven't done Georgia's children any favor. In fact, one of the things that there was a Georgetown University study that said, and I'll quote, "Child care quality depends on child care regulation like a plant depends on water. An insufficient amount guarantees problems, but an excessive amount is also problematic. Quality improvements that undermine availability or affordability should be evaluated with care. Enforcing existing rules deserves as much, if not more, attention than creating new rules. To improve child care quality, state policymakers should consider eliminating some state regulations, regulating more family daycare homes, allocating more resources to enforcement, and designing a more effective enforcement strategy." So to conclude, before we try to impose more regulations on licensed child care providers, maybe we should find a way to make it more affordable so parents aren't forced into unsafe and unregulated care, while at the same time enforcing the rules that we already have.
And just to share, I think I didn't know that other center owner. She's not active in our organization, but that is a story that is happening weekly in the state. I think it's not insignificant. And I think her timing, she just ran into expanding at the wrong time. This is not DECAL's choice. This is the result of the cuts that happened in pre-K last year, but I just got the number. When you take away the 2,000 slots for next year, it's going to be 380 less classrooms or so that are out there. So part of that is a timing issue because there are just less classrooms for DECAL to give. But I do think they've done a lot of good work under Commissioner Cagle in looking at the process of how classrooms are allotted. I think under the previous administration, you did have more preferential treatment, picking and choosing. But just keep in mind that we have lost over 1,000 centers, 15,000 jobs, 50 1,000 children that don't have access now that did. And that's very significant.
Thank you. Excuse me. And if you could, I would request that some of the data that we've spoken of today, especially Department of Labor, some of the other things, if you could make sure that the committee has copies of that, because I think that is an issue that we want to dive into. Thank you.
Thank you.
And last but not least, thank you for staying around, Norma Adams. Again, Mr. Adams, I apologize. It has been you see the schedules we keep around here today. I appreciate your patience and sticking around, and we certainly want to make sure that we hear you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. My name is Norma Adams, and I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Association of Homes and Services for Children. And I've been with this organization for 20 years. And regulation has been an important part of our organization and our advocacy. Let me start from the beginning. We support strong licensing and regulation of child care providers. One provider used to say, everybody can take care of children and everybody will, but everybody can't. And that's so true. And we got to be very careful how we regulate our child welfare agencies. Our organization represents over 140 licensed programs across the state of Georgia that care for Georgia's at-risk youth. Mostly these children are in Georgia's foster care system. I know this is about how do we create jobs by looking at how regulation is implemented. I think Whitney Fuchs said it right. You can create jobs by creating regulators. I don't think that's the kind of jobs we want to create. What we want to create is how do we get more services to the children that are in the custody of Georgia, and rather than creating regulators for Georgia. And this has been a real problem. We've had a great relationship with our licensing agency within the Department of Human Services. That's the Office of Residential Child Care. Over the past 20 years, we had, I say that we had. Matter of fact, our highest award was given to the first director of the licensing office over at DHS. Our highest, it's named after him, Eugene Calhoun. But over the years, that office has become more politicized, it's become more punitive, it's become more deficiency focused, and it's become extremely oppressive to our providers in providing good services. One of the things that the federal government and also the state government has been looking for is 3 qualities in our child welfare providers. That's safety, permanency, and well-being. Those are the outcomes that the federal government and the state government wants from our providers. But as we look at the regulations deal with more about process than it does about outcomes that the providers are trying to shoot for. I look at the process that our Office of Residential Child Care, a licensing arm of DHS, does. It's a violation model, and I liken it to the model that the State Patrol does in Georgia. You know, they catch speeders, they catch jaywalkers, they catch people who use the HOV lanes improperly. That's a deficiency model. I may have more tickets than you, but I might be a much better driver than you. And so a deficiency model really doesn't measure how good a job you do. As you look at our providers, we're using the deficiency model. I look at some of the best providers in the state we have. You go to their campus and you say, this is a state park. I mean, this is a resort. I mean, it just impresses you so much. You go into the children's homes and you meet the families and say, boy, this can't be a foster family. These kids are too well behaved and polite, and you realize they just do a super job, and they also take care of a lot of kids. But if you go to the website, which they put the violations, they may have 10 violations, and you go, wow. But you look at another provider, and they may have 1 violation, and you know that provider does inferior care. So a violation model does not measure the kind of things that we want to see happen, which is outcomes. What kind of outcomes do we want? And so not only has has the Office of Regulatory Services increased their regulation in the state of Georgia, but the department has even increased their regulation of our providers. They've created a contracting unit, and they have moved towards performance-based contracting. And one of the contract provision is you will comply with the state licensing regulations. So you got licensing coming in, you got the state contract department coming in, and then you got the other some 18 other regulatory bodies coming in as well. And so our providers just feel completely overwhelmed by licensing regulations. We believe there's ways in which this committee can help fix that. And I think the other providers who've talked about child care, they've talked about developmental disability services, and now child welfare services, I think there's a way which to fix it, is that the state is only to have one body to look at licensing regulations. And if a provider contracts with the state, that contracting body will review those agencies for the licensing regulations, and that will stand instead of licensing. That'll eliminate at least one other agency coming into our providers. But I think the most important thing that you can do to help our providers, whoever provides services, is to move more from a deficiency model or a process model and move towards an outcome model. An outcome model looks at what do we want to see happen in these provision of services, whether it be building quality homes. You want good insulation. I mean, you want good R factors. Well, that's the outcome. Okay, don't tell in the regulations how to build a door or how much insulation to put in, but say this is the insulation quality we want. But in child welfare, it would look like, are children safe? How many children got hurt at your facility? Okay, or how many children eloped or ran away from your facility? And then measure providers against each other based on that outcome, whether it might be safety. If it's on well-being, if you said you're going to do something for a kid, fix his eyesight, look at his teeth, make sure he goes to school, make sure he graduates from school, measure him on the outcome, not whether or not there's 3-to-1 ratio in staff, but whether or not they are met the outcomes we want. So mandate compliance to the outcomes, not compliance to the regulations. So those are two things y'all can do to help.
Mr. Adams, you make a great point, and some of us were speaking regarding this committee this morning, and it's interesting that I read something, and I told a group this morning that you're exactly right. We're trying to set a recipe book of how you're supposed to do everything, and we're ignoring what the final product is supposed to look like. And if we'll use some common sense and some judgment and start evaluating on what like you said, the outcome is, versus monitoring every last single little step and dictating every last little step, we would be better off. So I agree with what you're trying to tell us. So a couple of questions. Representative Braddock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for coming. I just wanted to say that ultimately the decision maker on outcomes should be the parent. Mm-hmm. So we could eliminate all the bureaucracy and need for rating systems and compliance with this and that. And it sounds like from the statistics that were quoted that 70% of the parents are opting to go with private or individual healthcare providers, and we're not regulating those. So it's just they're going to choose what is best for their outcome. But you said you're dealing with
foster kids. With
foster kids, so you need some sort of oversight on ensuring that there's a decision made as if there was a parent there. Is that
right?
Okay.
What's interesting is that our providers care for half the foster kids in the state. The other half is cared for by the state. They're not licensed, so they license us, but they don't license themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we're competing with the private sector.
With ourselves.
Representative Harden.
Yeah, I apologize. I had to step out for a few minutes, but I like what you were saying. Tell me who you are, please.
My name is Norma Adams, and I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Association of Homes and Services for Children. We represent child welfare providers across the state of Georgia.
Okay, and yeah, and I've been in healthcare all my life, and outcomes is where we're trying to push healthcare. Unfortunately, it just keeps pushing further down, and we just keep telling you, you got to do this, this, this. And, all right, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Adams, again, thank you for sticking in here as we finish up, and I think you've also touched on a nerve that we've talked about, and I think this committee wants to start looking at how we start simplifying things, and again, maybe changing the approach by which we look at regulations and how we implement them. So thank you for that. And again, any material that you have that you could leave with the committee, talking about the regulations, talking about giving examples of what's going on, we would certainly appreciate that.
Thank you.
To the members of the committee that are left and to those in the audience, thank you very much for sticking in with us. I know these meetings are long, but we have a lot of people that come from all over the state to give testimony, and that's just the very nature of these meetings. And thank you for your patience and certainly staying with us at this late hour. We're going to have a next meeting next Wednesday, 2 o'clock, room 506. Again, next meeting is Wednesday, 2 o'clock, room 506. That's on the 15th. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.